Hello, my name is Rob Sandstrom. Today we're going to cover a process of how you would cut something that's longer than your CNC bed. That process is called tiling, and we can do that in the vectric VCarve Pro software very easily and straightforward. So as an example, we have this sign which is 48 inches long. The IQ CNC bed is only 36 inches long. So to be able to cut this sign, we need to be able to set up a process where we can cut part of the sign once and then cut the rest of the sign down the road and pull it through. That's called tiling. So today we'll cover that in the software, how you design the sign or project that you want to cut that's longer, how we design that project so it can be cut along with what we'll call alignment methodologies, like an alignment hole is what we're going to use today. And then we'll go into actually cutting the material after we cover that in the software.
With that backdrop, let's go ahead and get started in creating a file so that we can cut this sign. Create a new file. My material is 11.25 inches wide, 48 inches long, 0.73 inches thick. I'd set this up once before. I'm going to zero off the material surface. I'm going to design the material off the lower left corner, and standard resolution works for what we're trying to do. It's a simple, straightforward sign. So the first thing that I want to do, think through where I'm going. So the first thing I know is that I am going to need an area over on the right side for my alignment pins and hold down. So that will limit how wide the actual text is when I start to make this sign. So I'm going to put a guideline there, and then I'm going to right click, hit relative to that guideline, and I'm going to come over 1 inch, which will then limit my sign width to 10.25 inches, and we'll create a new guide. Close. Now I know not to make any designs that are further than that guideline right there. I can get rid of this guideline, and let's get started. So I'm going to make a border box, I'll call it, and I know that's going to be 10.25 by 48 inches. Hit apply, and I'm going to change the name of this layer to border box, and I'll leave it black. The next thing I want to do is actually bring in my sign text. I'll do that by importing a vector. That's pretty straightforward. You can see the size of the vector is down here in the lower left corner. So we're going to align that vector to the center of the material so we can actually see it. Hit close. I'm actually going to group this for now to make it so I can hit G or hit the group. Allows me to work with it easier. I'm going to resize it to a size that I want. I know that my sign is 10.25 inches wide, so I'm going to go ahead and make this, say, 7 inches, and let's see what that gives us. I'm going to go ahead and leave that link XY so it all stays in proportion. Hit apply. I'm going to close that. And then I'm going to align this sign with the border that we put in before. So I'm going to click on that sign, hit shift, click on my sign border, go to align. I'm going to align to the selection, and now we're going to be in the center of that sign. Hit close when it's all said and done. Next thing I want to do is ungroup, since I'm not going to be manipulating that anymore. So when I start carving, I make sure that I can carve as I want to. I'm pretty sure I'll probably have to set up 2 different toolpaths just because of the difference in size of these texts and having cut a similar sign in the past. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the smaller text, make sure it's all selected, and I'm going to move this to a new layer called small text. And I'll go ahead and make that a blue color. Hit OK. And I'm going to take this, it's already on its own layer, so I'm going to just rename that layer. I'm going to change this to a dark blue, and I'm going to rename it to large text. So now I've got my text on a layer. I've got a border. One other thing I want to do then is actually give myself a profile So when I cut this sign out in the future, I have something cut against. I'm not going to need to cut on this side of the sign. It's going to stay solid. So I only need to cut this one line. So I need to build myself a line here to cut with. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call that profile right. And I'm going to go ahead and make that, let's say, a purple color. And I'm going to make that the default. Add new. I'm going to turn off what I thought I renamed this earlier. I guess I didn't, border. I'm going to turn that off. So that goes away. I'm going to make this the default. I'm going to put a line right there on the edge. Come straight down 48 inches. Hit close. And now I have my profile right. And to make sure that went on the right layer, let me turn that off, and you can see it comes back. And now I no longer need that guide. So far we've got our text, we've got our profile border. Next thing we need to do is create our alignment holes. So what do I look for when I'm looking for my alignment holes? I look for a break in the text or the design. That's not necessary, but if you want to be extra sure not to have any goof ups when you're pulling the material through or doing something, your best chance for not having any breaks in your cut or something that you have to sand a little more on is to find a nice area where you can break. This is a 48-inch sign. You need to have enough solid material to hold down and to be to allow your alignment tiling to go well. So what I like to do is I'll take my guideline, I'll come down, and if I look right in there, say 28.5 inches is a good guide. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to build my alignment holes in that area. And I will do one more alignment temporarily. I'm going to right click. So I need at least a 1/4 inch between the border I'm going to cut and the edge of the dowel. So I want to move from this guideline, I want to move in a direction it is 0.4, let's say. Let's try that. Hit create new guideline. So when I put my hole in, I got to make sure the edge of that is no closer than that area. So let's put our alignment holes in. 0.38 inches is what I found to be a good fit for a 3/8 inch dowel. So I'm going to create that right in that location, hit close, and I notice it's over a little. That's probably okay, but I'm going to go ahead and move it slightly. And we know our dowel is going to come out to this area. We know our 1/4 inch bit is going to come by on the outside here. A good test would be to make that 0.25 inches, apply. And so we got plenty of room in there for the bit. Hit close, hit delete to get rid of that, and come back to finish up our alignment holes. We know that we're aligning at 28.5 inches. This will become clearer as you see our tiling toolpath. I'm going to select that alignment hole. First I'm going to turn off the guidelines because they can get in the way. I'm going to select the alignment hole to have 2 rows of Y. I'm going to have 1 column. I'm going to come down minus 28.5 inches. As you can tell, I've been through this and practiced this a little bit once. I'm going to hit copy, and you'll see that our next alignment hole is split in half, and I'll show you why that's the case when we get into the actual tiling process. Hit close. And now what I want to do, those are both selected. I want to move those to their own layer. It's a new layer, and I'll call that alignment. And let's make those red. Hit OK. And so now we have layers that are for our large text, our small text, our border profile, and our alignment. And at this time, it's time to start setting up our toolpaths. So the first toolpath I like to set up is actually my alignment holes. And the way I do that is with a profile. And I want to go start at 0, and I want to go Z plus 0.5 0.5 because I'm going to go down into the spoiler board. I'm going to go through the material down into the spoiler board for this first set of toolpaths. I'm going to use a downcut bit, but instead of the I've got a very conservative pass depth, so I want to actually edit the pass depth. If I hit select and edit it, it's going to change it for the toolpath, so I don't want to do that. So I'm going to hit edit, and I'm going to change that pass depth to 0.25. Hit OK, and I'm going to be inside left. I don't need a separate last pass. I don't need to add tabs. I want to put a spiral. I want that to spiral down into the hole. That gives us the cleanest cut, and I'm going to call this 250 align, because that tells me I'm using my 1/4" bit for my alignment hole. And this will actually be my first toolpath. So I'm going to put 1-250 align. Next thing I want to do is select the actual vectors as alignment, and they're closed vectors, so I hit close. So I've got my spiral, everything looks like it's good. I hit calculate. We know that it's going to go through by 0.5 inches. We hit OK, and we can see our alignment holes are located here and here, and that's the very first thing that we're going to drill even before we start getting into the tiling toolpaths when we start setting up. So keep that in mind. Let me go back to my 2D view and let's set up the rest of the toolpaths. Now for the rest of the toolpaths, I'll want to use my tiling manager. I select that over in the toolpaths, tile toolpaths. Normally comes up 48. We want to feed through in the Y direction. Some machines would go through in the X, or some, if you had a really wide material, you could do individual tiles. So you could actually do something wider if you wanted to, but it would be broken down to the width of your machine. Our toolpath, we said we're going to set up for 28.5 inches is how we're going to tile it in the length. I'm going to hit update tiles there. I'm going to have a 0.25 overlap. That's your choice, but that usually helps with making a smoother transition from one tile to the next. Hit update tiles again, and we'll come over here and you can see that our alignment hole, the tile toolpath goes right through the center, and there will be some overcut of a 1/4 inch. So it's actually a little bit of an overcut for the tiling path. That's what the overlap does for you. Tries to keep it smooth. So now that we have the tiling toolpaths, we keep the tiling toolpath manager up. We come over and we start defining our toolpaths. The last thing we're going to cut is this profile. So the first thing I want to cut is the small lettering. I'm going to use a V-bit. To get the depth I want out of this, I'm going to go ahead and use a start at, say, 0.02 start depth from my experience, because this is not real thick. And flat depth of 0.125. I'm going to select 60-degree V-bit. I doubt that I'll actually be able to use any kind of clearance tool in here because these just aren't that wide, but I'll try one. I'll use an 1/8 inch end mill, hit select, and I'll come select my 1/8 inch end mill, select. We're going to select close vectors associated with toolpath, and we're going to select the small text, hit close, and I'm going to say B60 small, calculate. As I thought, my 1/8 inch wasn't going to do anything, so I will remove that. Calculate again, and we're going to color that a nice black so we can see it. And now we have what our tile 1 will look like. So this is tile 1, and then we'll look at tile 2. Let's hit a preview. All right, let's go to tile 2, preview, and let's see how deep that is and if we like it okay. So if we come hover over it, as you can see, it says it's 0.06 inches deep here, 0.12, that's a good depth. We've got a depth of 0.125, and so where we want to look is right in these areas right here, and we see that that's about 0.03 in that area, 0.01, so that's not very deep. That's not even actually a millimeter deep in these areas. So we may actually need to start those portions a little deeper when we get done. So we'll watch that as we carve, and if we have to make adjustments, we will, but we can expect those to be thinly carved in this area. So the next thing we want to do is set up the toolpath for the larger text. Hit close, V-text. We're going to go over here to tile 1. We're going to start at 0. We don't need that extra depth. 0.125, same V-bit. This time we will use a clearance tool, and we can actually remove this one and select a 1/4 inch because this text is pretty large size. Select that one, do a raster, and I'm going to go 90 degrees. Selector, we're now going to use the large text, associate with toolpath, hit close, V60, calculate. Not worried about the overlap with those vectors. We will turn those also black, preview the visible toolpaths. And if we look at the depth of those, we'll see they're very deep, all the way down to the 0.125. That's not an issue. Hit close. And now we have one more toolpath to define, and that is the border. That's a profile cut. And we want to go Z plus 0.01 is what I like to go. 250 down cut spiral, that's good. We're going to go on the outside right. I'm not going to put in a separate last pass with this pine. It cuts pretty clean. I am going to add tabs. I'm going to make it 0.25 inches long and 0.125 inches thick. I need to edit the tabs, and I'm going to want at least 4 tabs. Add tabs. So we got 2 tabs on the bottom and 2 tabs on the top. I'm going to move this tab down here, move this tab down here, and I'm actually going to put one more tab on the bottom here. Hit close. So we're on the outside, and we're going to calculate profile. We're going to call it border. Oh, we'll just do profile. Calculate. Hit OK. And now we'll preview in the order we'll cut them. Tile path tool 1, preview visible. We can see the tabs. Go to preview. We'll go to preview visible toolpath, and we can see that we've cut the material, and that's going to be our sign when we're done. So at this point, we've designed the sign, we set up all the tool paths, and now we've got to get ready to go set the material on the machine and be able to cut it. So there's a couple things we need to think about as we go out to the machine. First thing I'm going to do is just hide this tiling manager so it's not in the way. I'm going to take it over the 2D view, and I'm thinking about how I want to put this on the machine. There's a couple key elements that are important. I've got these alignment holes, and I've got these alignment holes are critical. They need to be drilled into our MDF. And where I've had problems in the past, if I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing and haven't thought it through, is these end up being either in a bolt hole for my MDF hold down or aluminum track. So previous to this video, at one time, I actually mapped my spoiler board, and that's where this comes in handy. So let's go demonstrate how we can make sure that we're not going to have problems with the alignment holes or hold down of this material. So now I'm going to bring in my spoiler bed that I had saved as an SVG file in an earlier project. Import the vector. Pull up my Laguna bed mapped. Hit open. It comes in. I'm going to make sure it's grouped because I want things to move together. And now I'm going to take this grouped vector and I'm going to align it to the material first. So that's center of the material. That's not where I really want it. Now that we have the sign project in the bed aligned so it's center, let's talk about how we can best use this to ensure that we don't have problems with our alignment holes and our hold downs. So first thing I want to do is I want to take this spoiler board and I'm going to move it down so it lines up with the bottom of the actual project. This is the actual board that we're talking about right here. One thing I do know is that when I drill the alignment holes, it can't be on the end of the spoiler board. It needs to be up. So I'm going to move the actual spoiler board because that's what I'm trying to locate, is the real board on the spoiler board. I'm going to move the actual spoiler board down then 1 inch so that this hole can be 1 inch up. So I use the move tool, and I'm going to move -1, apply, and I'm going to close it. So now I know that the bottom of the board is in a location that I can put an alignment hole and I won't have a problem. I also know that this is actually in the center of the spoiler board. And so I can take a look here and I can say, do I have any problems with my alignment holes? Yes or no. And you can see that I've got an alignment hole here, and these areas here are my aluminum tracks. So if I drill in at this point, there will be no problems with my alignment holes. That's assuming I actually have my board in the middle. So that's convenient, because actually it's just on the right side of another track. You can see here. So if I take my spoiler board and I move it straight across, then I'm going to be on the end of an aluminum track, and I can then use that to help judge where my fence is going to be. That's one concept, if you want to be in the middle. The other concept is that what we do is we move the whole board over closer to the edge, which is where I normally put my fences. In fact, on my machine at home, I normally have a fence that is 1 inch away from the aluminum track here. That's where I normally would have a fence. So now let's move this closer to where my fence is, which is normally 1 inch. To get that location, we're going to want this board 1 inch away from my fence, and we're going to be moving the spoiler board to match it. So I'm going to put a guide along the edge of my board. I'm going to right click on it. Relative to that guide, I'm going to want it -1 inch. Hit create new guide, hit close. There's my new guide, and that tells me how far over I'm actually going to move this spoiler board. I'm going to move it from here, and I'm going to come over. I'm going to hit move. Right there. I'm 1 inch away, I'm 1 inch up, hit close, and that would be my normal fence location. As we can see, that won't work very well because the alignment holes would be right in the track. Since it already lined up once, let's save some moves, and what we'll do is we'll hit Control Z till we're back in the center. Control Z once, Control Z twice. Now we're back in the center. Now that we moved the spoiler board such that the piece is actually located in the middle of the spoiler board again, we can see that we are missing the track. Let's take a look at how close we are to the track. We'll do that using the inspection tool or measurement tool. And I'm going to come up close so I can get a good location. I'm going to click on the edge of the dowel hole, and I'm going to go to the MDF, and we can see that we're 0.4 inches away, which is probably okay for the hit close, which is probably okay for the distance. We're a ½ inch away, so that should give us plenty of room for the dowel hole. So we'll go ahead and keep it in that location for right now. Actually, what I want to do is I want to move it so that the fence isn't straddling this aluminum. I'm going to go ahead and put a fence so it goes right along this edge of the aluminum. So let's take another look at how far we need to move it. We're going to want to go from this corner over to this aluminum, which is 1.13 inches. If I put 1.25 inches, then we know that we'll clear the aluminum, hit close, and there's enough for the fence to sit here nice and flush, and we'll be okay with our dowel holes. So we want to take and move spoiler board over, hit the move tool, and we're going to go in the X position relative 1.25. Let's see what that looks like. Hit apply, and now we can see that we're on the other side. The fence can move along here. We don't have any issues with that. Our dowel holes are here, way away from a bolt, way away from a track. And anywhere inside, if we keep it within a 1/2 inch of this edge, we could put hold down screws or other hold down techniques that won't go in the bolt hole. So this looks like a good location. Hit close. So the next thing I want to do is, I know this is 1 inch up, but I need to know how far away from the aluminum, either side. I could take a measurement on either side, and I'll just go ahead and take the aluminum because it's easy to clip onto. My fence needs to be. So let's take a measurement. Go from here to here, and I can see that's 6.166 inches. Let me round it off to 6 inches will work just fine. Hit close, and as long as I'm at 6 inches, I should miss my tracks, bolt holes. So let's make a couple notes to make it easier for us to set up. To do that, I'm going to use the text tool, and I'm going to, let's say, fence edge located 6 inches from aluminum outside border. Let me make that a little bit bigger. So that's a note that tells me when I'm setting up that I want the fence edge located 6 inches away from this outside aluminum. I should also add into that and 1 inch up from bottom. So now I know where I'm going to put the fence, and I know I'm going to put the board up 1 inch. Now that we've identified where we're going to put our hold downs, where we're going to locate the board, it's time to save our toolpaths to our USB drive so that we can actually go out and cut the project. At this time, I'll save them to my hard drive and then transfer them over to my USB drive later. Simply goes faster. So we're going to go to the toolpaths tab. Remember previously we had defined all of these toolpaths. The first toolpath we want to save is actually the alignment toolpath. Turn on the tiling manager. I want to hit save, and I want to make sure that the tile toolpath is turned off when I save this toolpath, and I'll hit save. Toolpath for Laguna 1-250 ALI, hit save, and I'm going to check to see that that toolpath saved in the directory I want it to, and you can see it's saved as 1-25 ALI, and it's only got one toolpath. I'll explain that here in a minute. The next toolpath we want to save is the small text toolpath, which is a 60-degree V-bit, and at the same time we can save the large text toolpath because it's also a 60-degree V-bit. The one thing we want to do with that is to ensure that we hit the tile toolpath tab over here. We'll save that toolpath into the same location that we saved the other one, and we're just going to, instead of small, since we've combined them, I'm just going to say V60. So I know that that's the bit, and I'm going to put a 2 in front of it so I know it's my second cut that I want to make. Hit save. Let's take a look at what was saved in the actual folder. So notice the difference. The difference is we now have 2 toolpaths, one for tile 1 and one for tile 2. That allows us now to tile the material through for the project. You'll see how that's done when we actually cut the material, as opposed to just the one toolpath. The next toolpath we want is the end mill. I always like my V-cuts first, so is the end mill for the clearance for the large text. We're going to save that toolpath. We made sure the tile toolpaths check is on, and that's actually going to be our third cut, and it already says 3, so we're going to leave it there. Hit save. If we look at the folder again, we now see that we have a tile 1 3EM25 and a tile 2 3EM25. And then the next toolpath that we're going to save is the final toolpath, which is the cutting of the border. We're going to save that toolpath, again making sure tile toolpath is checked. Hit save, and that's going to be the final toolpath, and so that's number 4. Once again, let's take a look at the toolpaths that were generated. So now you have your 4th toolpath, tile 1, tile 2. Let's go ahead and discuss each of those toolpaths at this time. The toolpaths you'll have on your USB drive as you go out to cut this project will look like the following. You'll see there's only one that doesn't have a tiling toolpath in front of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut. This is for the alignment holes. So we're going to cut our alignment holes first. So we'll put down the material. We'll cut through the 2 alignment holes that are part of this project by holding the material down against the fence where it belongs. And then you'll see how we pull that through those alignment holes help keep everything aligned. The next are all tiling toolpaths, and the way you look at this is you're going to start with tiling toolpath number 1 and cut tile number 1, and then you're going to go through the first one, the second one, and the third one. Or you could call it the second one, third one, and fourth one, and you'll cut all of tile 1 first. Once you do that, then you'll move it down. Now remember, this tile path right here is the one that is actually going to separate the border. So as you pull it down, you'll be cutting the edge off where the alignment holes are, but you've got tabs in there, and that should not be a problem. The full border will not be cut off until you get to this toolpath right here. So once again, you're going to cut tile 1 V60, tile 1 end mill, and tile 4 end mill. So that's how you're going to cut this thing at the CNC, and when you watch what we're doing those 3 cuts. Another alternative, if you wanted to not change bits, is of course you could start with tile 1 2V60 and move right over to tile 2 2V60, tile 3 here, tile 2 3EM, and then you could go down to the last profile cut. It's up to you how you want to do that, but for alignment sakes, I like to cut all of one tile to begin with and then all of another tile. Now that we understand the toolpaths, we're ready to go out and cut the project. I always like to take one last look at everything in a preview mode. Go to the 3D view, and I'm going to close this. I'm going to go to the preview mode. I'm going to hit reset preview. I'm going to turn the tile toolpaths off for a second, and I'm going to cut the alignment holes. Preview visible toolpath, and you can see that we've cut it here. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut the V60 and EM like I would if I were cutting the material. I'll turn the tile toolpaths back on. I'm going to go to tile 1 because that's the first one I'm going to cut. I've already colored those black. I'm going to preview those visible. And then I'm going to cut the profile. I could have picked that right off the bat, hit preview. I'm going to go to tile 2. And I'm going to select, might as well select all of them together. And this is how it's going to look when we're done. Looks like all of the toolpaths are working just like I want. Go to 2D view, and you can see it's in the middle of the spoiler with our hold downs in a good location. With that, let's go cut this project.
At this time, we're ready to actually start cutting on the IQ, the sign we just designed. Before we do that, let me do a brief overview of what you're going to see as we go through this process. You may recall in the video that we had to set up a fence that was approximately 6 inches away from the edge of this aluminum to make sure that we could put alignment holes that didn't end up inside of the aluminum material. So what you're going to see is I've already mounted the fence. What I haven't done is actually make sure this fence is as straight as we need it to be in accordance with the CNC. So you'll see me do a thin trim on the edge of this fence to make sure it's nice and straight. Then you'll see me mount this sign to the CNC, and I'll start with mounting it in a specific location. It's going to be about 1 inch back, up against the fence, and then you'll see me hold it down. I'll make an XY0 on here as my starting point, and then I'll start the process of cutting the alignment holes and doing the cuts. As I'm doing the cuts, you'll see me start with tile 1 first, then I'll pull it through the machine and I'll do tile 2. So that's what you're going to see as we walk through this process as we're videotaping it. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and zero the bit which we already installed. This is a 1/4 inch end mill. I'm going to zero that to the bed because what I'm going to do is set up to make sure this edge of this is actually straight as can be compared to the CNC. Now, I didn't actually have to zero it, but it makes it more convenient for me to know how close I am to the bed when I want to make this straight. I could have done it all by eyeball. So I'm 1.5 millimeters up. Making sure the tip is just at the top here. It doesn't have to be exact. And I'm going to come in just about a 0.5 millimeter or so. I'm going to go down to 0. And now by doing this, I'm right at the skimming of the top of this material. I'll make sure that I'll cut the full edge here, and we'll guarantee that we have a straight edge. If I don't cut the full edge, I'll make another cut. So what I'm doing right now is just making some pencil marks, similar to sanding, on the edge of that fence to make sure that it completely disappears. That way I'll know I got the whole edge. Turn the machine on. Fast speed. And go Y+ all the way down. Off and up. Now that we've made sure that the fence is nice and square, the next step is to start setting up for the actual cut by putting in the proper bits and putting the sign on the bed to hold it down. So the first thing I want to do is actually change to a V-bit, because that's the first tool I'm going to use, and it's also the best for making the alignment for my XY0, which we'll see in a second. So let me come down. I'm using a 60-degree V-bit. And I'm going to move it out of the way for a second. Next step is to actually mount the material we're going to use as a sign. One of the things you'll see is I've actually covered this with an aura mask so that it'll make painting the sign easier later. That's why this is blue. I've also marked this as the top because that's where I want to have at the top, the sign at the top after looking at the board. I'm sliding it along the fence here, which we know has been put at a location so that when I drill my alignment holes, I won't have any problems with these bolts or this aluminum track. I discussed that earlier in the design piece of the software. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm actually going to place this piece about an inch back. That part isn't as critical because I'm going to zero off the job right here. But somewhere around an inch back is what I did in the design. Somewhat close, good enough. So now I have this located where I want to locate it. I need to hold it down temporarily so it doesn't slide around while I'm putting in these bolts. I'm just going to use this hold down for a second. And in reality, I could use this by itself, but when tiling, I like to make sure that I'm nice and firm against the fence when I'm first setting up, and it's not going to slip. You'll recall from the tiling video, tiling path is 28.5 inches up from the edge. That's where our first alignment hole will appear. So if I measure up 28.5 inches, I know that that clamp is past that area and will not create any challenges for us from a cutting perspective. We have everything held down. It's looking good. We're up against the fence. Everything's set. Let me put one more hold down in there. And as long as I am within a ½ inch to ¼ inch of this edge, I know I'll be fine. Get that sharp bit out of the way. This will be cut off later, so it will not appear in the sign. Okay, as long as I'm within a ½ inch here, I know I'm going to be okay because the cut is going to be an inch in. I'll hold that down. This clamp could get hit, so I'm going to take it out now that I've got the screw in place. Make sure everything's solid. Solid back here. I'm past the cutting area, so that's not a problem. And now I'm ready to zero this machine in the XY direction and the Z direction. I'm going to come down close so I can see it better. Now this isn't critical. A couple millimeters within each other are just fine for this sign. And I'm going to come down. I'm good in the Y direction. And now I'm going to come in the X direction a little bit more. And we're good there. And we got XY 0. And now we'll zero in the Z direction. Using the puck. Making sure the plug's in. It was loose. You always have to watch that on these machines. Now we're zeroed in the Z direction. So now we're zeroed X, Y, and Z. Put on our safety glasses. Now that we're zeroed X, Y, and Z, our first tool path, I need to change the bit to a 1/4 inch end mill at this time. So now that I've got the board mounted and I've zeroed it in the XY direction, I need to cut my alignment holes. I've changed my bit from the V bit, which had a nice point for XY, to my 1/4 inch end mill so that I can cut my alignment holes so that I can make sure when I'm tiling, the sign moves in the exact length it needs to allow the tiling feature to work and the sign to cut properly. So that's our next step, is cutting the alignment holes after I zero this bit. So there's going to be 2 holes. There's going to be 1 hole right on the very edge of this board. It'll be half of the board here, a little bit. And that's cutting our first tiling alignment hole. And then 28.5 inches up, we'll see another alignment hole cut through the board into the spoiler. Both of these will go through the board into the spoiler. With that, let's go ahead and start. So in this case, we're selecting that toolpath right there. Hit OK. We're using a swirling toolpath. As we said, it would be halfway on this piece and 28.5 inches. We're going to turn on the vacuum and vacuum these alignment holes out to make sure that the alignment pins will go in properly. So now that we've got the holes drilled, let's make sure these alignment pins fit the way we want them to. That's a nice snug fit. And that's a nice snug fit. That's actually good that it's nice and tight, to be honest. And that'll pull right out when we actually cut it. So now we've got our alignment pins in, and the next part is to actually start the tiling and cutting of the material. So the next step in this process is to change bits so we can start our first cutting path, and that's our V bit. Now we need to zero our V bit. And now that we've zeroed our V bit, it's ready to align the first cutting path. And let me demonstrate on the controller what I'm looking at, because I tried to point this out when I was discussing the software, but let me emphasize again. Here you're going to see toolpaths that start out with a T1, which stands for tile 1, a T2 that starts for tile 2, etc. So I'm going to first cut all of the T1 toolpaths, so there'll be an additional tool change here in the near future. And then when I go to tile 2, I'll change back to the V bit. That way I get everything on tile 1 cut at the same time. So in this case, I'm going with tile 1, V60. So we're changing into our 1/4 inch end mill, and we will then do the cut to take the material out of the center of these letters. Need to re-zero the bit. Now that we're zeroed, we'll go ahead and start the next toolpath. So the next toolpath we're going to do is tile 1. It's our 3rd toolpath, which is the 3rd one after our alignment, EM25. And that will carve out the material inside. Again, we went from tile 1 to tile 1. Okay, we've now finished carving the sign. Now we need to cut the profile so that the sign will be cut off. The alignment holes will not be in the place. So here we go. We're going to go with the 4th toolpath. Hit run. Okay. So our tile path for our last toolpath is tile 1, tile path 4. This is how I named it. You can name it whatever you want, but you know it's tile 1. And it's our 4th toolpath, and it's a end mill. So we've just now completed cutting tile 1. The next step is we're going to move the board down to tile 2. Before I do that, I wanted to check one thing in the software demo. You noticed I said I'd have to watch how deep this bit cut to see if I was going to be able to put paint in there and be able to be sanded and demonstrate the kind of sign clarity that I wanted. And it is. It's fine. So we don't have to do anything with adjusting. So the next step is to go ahead and move this sign down in the forward direction. Because we're not going to have support in the forward direction, I've got a roller here. You can use whatever device you want. This roller works real good for me. It's not real heavy, and we'll use that to actually move this thing forward. I'm going to move the gantry out of the way there for a second, just to make it easier to work with. I'm going to remove this hold down. Lift this hold down. Pull the alignment pins out of the way. Nice snug fit, that's good. And now I'm going to move this piece down along that fence. Remember, I'm keeping along the fence to the point where I hit this alignment pin right here. So now I'm nice and tight against the fence. I've got this alignment pin here, and I can put my hold downs into the board where they'll be cut off. So now getting ready for tile 2. To make sure that I cut things in the right proportion, I've used this alignment pin. We've moved it down, placed it in there, placed it against the fence as we drug it through. We've got nice support, so it's not going to create any challenges or stresses on the board. Everything's set for us to start cutting tiling path number 2. Remember, I start out with the V-bit, so I'm going to bring the spindle over and change into the V-bit at this time. Now that I have the bit in, I need to zero the bit in the Z direction. And we're actually ready now to start the tiling path. Okay, so this is my second tool path on tile 2. The first one was the alignment holes. So I've titled it 2V60. The machine, when I put the tile path inside the tool path, it automatically registered it as tile 2. So this is tile 2, second tool path for me. So the next step in the process is to change over to the 1/4 inch end mill, which will clear out the center part just like we did over here. Now we'll zero the bit. And we'll go ahead and run the next toolpath. Toolpath tile 2, T2, 3, end mill 25. At this point, we're on our final tool path for this project. It's going to finish cutting the border. We're using toolpath tile 2, 4, 25 end mill. At this time, we've cut all of our tool paths, and you can see the sign is completely cut. We took a sign that was 48 inches and cut it on a 36-inch CNC bed. I've actually cut signs much longer than this. I've cut a sign up to 8 feet long once for a client. So you can make this as long as you want. These alignment holes are the key. As long as you have those alignment holes, you'll be able to tile that thing all the way through and keep everything aligned. At this time we've completed. The next step is to take it off the machine. Typically, before I take it off the machine, I like to cut the tabs so that I can have the sign by itself while it's still sitting on the machine. So that's what I'm going to do at this time. We've concluded cutting our sign. I'm pretty happy with the way it looks and turned out. Remember, we tiled this thing, which is longer than our bed. And it looks pretty good as far as I'm concerned. What's going to happen next is I'm going to go ahead and put some black paint in all of this area that was carved out. And because I had this masking on, I don't have to worry about it ruining the rest of the sign, and that will really pop. And so I'm looking forward to that. Put the black paint on, put a clear coat, and I'll have a beautiful sign that I can enjoy. Thank you again for watching this video. If you like this video, Please like, comment, or share. Please subscribe to our channel. Appreciate you watching. Thank you.